The world is changing faster than ever before. In the past 10 years, there has been an exponential technological evolution, the kind of technology that has revolutionized the world of work as we know it.
The Lawyers Hub was founded on the principle that law needs to interact more with technology, and that greatly affects tech policy as well as access to justice. So the Lawyers Hub exists as a confluence between law and technology, working on tech policy, on emerging technologies, as well as increasing and upskilling the knowledge of lawyers in the area of technology. We support tech startups as well to ensure that the tech ecosystem also engages in policy, but as well understand the issues around data protection, issues that also concern their structure, as well as intellectual property.
If you look at the evolution of technology, it's been relegated as an alternative in most systems. But the realization that 21st century has brought us into is that technology has to be an integral part of our day-to-day systems. And if you look at some critical technology areas like artificial intelligence, blockchain, nanotechnology, biotechnology, then it gives us a strong indication that if we do not start having discussions on the use of these technology areas, as far as law is concerned, then we may be in some kind of trouble. So Lawyers Hub is leading the debate on the use of these technologies, especially in Africa.
Over the years, the Lawyers Hub has supported the innovation ecosystem, convened events such as the Africa Law Tech Festival and the Global Legal Hackathon. The Lawyers Hub has also supported government innovations within the justice sector, as well as trained government institutions and more than 10,000 lawyers across Africa on emerging tech policy.
Our dream at the Lawyers Hub is to have open access to law. We envision a continent where there is access to justice through leveraging technology and with a crowd of enlightened lawyers. We see a continent that also protects its own through better tech policies, that emerging technologies, through its regulation, will offer better value and consumer protection for the people within Kenya and within the African continent. We envision that we will convene policy makers, regulators, as well as lawyers who are more enlightened on emerging technologies and with better digital skills. And we invite you to be a part of this great vision for Kenya and for Africa.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Selina Onyando. I'm a Tech Policy Fellow here at the Lawyers Hub, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. Today's session is a timely conversation on home fiber and fair use policies. We're considering various aspects in this conversation, including meaningful connectivity on the continent, as well as what consumer protection interests should look like when we're regulating the internet. Before we begin, we'll be launching a poll question just to interact more with our participants. Remember, you can engage with us on the chat, ask your questions in the Q&A as well. We are also streaming live on our Facebook and YouTube channels. That's Lawyers Hub Kenya on both Facebook and YouTube. Remember to tweet us should you have any feedback or insights from today's discussion. Our Twitter is at Lawyers Hub Kenya, and the hashtags for today are Lawyers Hub and Africa Law Tech. So our poll is currently live. You can see the poll on your screen. Just take a few seconds to answer the question on the poll. Our question for the first poll today is, do you have broadband internet installed? If yes, where? So we would like to just gauge the demographic of our participants just to understand how to structure today's conversation. So we can see the results live. We'll also be publishing them in about 25 seconds or so, if I'm not wrong. So our first response is yes, at home, if you have broadband internet installed at home. Yes, at work, if you have broadband internet installed at work. Yes, both home and at work, if you have broadband internet installed in both locations. And no, if you do not have broadband internet installed as well. So the poll will be closing in about 10 seconds, and then we'll be able to share the results live. So take some time to participate in the poll. We have 77% who have voted. Again, feel free to utilize the chat section to introduce yourself, tell us where you're joining in from and why this conversation is of particular interest to you. We also have the Q&A section for any questions. We'll be taking some questions at the end of the session. We'll now be sharing the results of our poll. Okay, so based off the results from about 100 plus participants, most of our participants have home fiber installed both at work and at home. That's 50% of our participants. And 41%, followed by a close 41% who have home fiber installed. And we have a 6% who have broadband internet installed at work. So 2% of our participants do not have broadband internet installed. Very interesting results on that. I think this would be crucial in helping guide the discussion for our panelists particularly. Thank you, media team, for sharing that. We'll now be closing the results. We'll now proceed to the second part of today's session. I'll have my colleague, Victor Gatey, who is a policy assistant here at the Lawyers Hub, come in and share a brief presentation to set the scene on what the home fiber landscape looks like in Kenya. So thank you, and I'll now hand over to my colleague, Victor.
Thank you. My name is Victor Gatey, and I'm a policy assistant at the Lawyers Hub. I will just wait as the media team puts up the presentation. So I will give a brief presentation to just share some insight into the topic of our discussion today. And we'll start with a brief background of internet usage in Kenya specifically. So next slide. The Communication Authority of Kenya reports a steady increase in the total subscriptions for the fixed wired internet subscriptions. So you can see from the quarter in October to December and Jan to March, there's about 20 to 30,000 new subscriptions, as well as between April, June, and July, September, the last two, there's also a 20 to 30,000 increase in subscription. But you will notice that between January and March 2020 and April and June 2020, there's a peak in interest. And there, subsequently, there was also almost 60,000 new subscriptions for internet. This can be partly attributed to the coronavirus pandemic and the containment measures that quickly followed. So we see people start to adopt this stay-at-home strategies for work, for school, and even for social interactions. So what do? They need unlimited subscription plans, and wired internet subscriptions offered by ISPs in Kenya are the best options for this. So what are fair usage policies? So in defining fair usage policy, next. In defining the fair usage policy, we see that it is a policy put in place by internet providers to limit the amount of data that one user can download in a given time frame. So basically, the ISPs are just trying to make sure that all subscribers are using internet in moderation. So what is the rationale for this? The rationale for this is based on the utilitarian theory, which is, next slide, sorry, which is just trying to ensure that the best quality of broadband is available to the maximum number of users at all times. So why is this so? Bandwidth is actually highly limited, and in order to prevent a few mass data consumers from eating into the bandwidth of other users, the ISPs will actually just cap internet usage altogether or throttle down the said abusers' data speeds. So next we see examples of ISPs and how they have implemented this fair usage policies. A good example is the recent Safaricom home fiber usage fair usage policy that just came up a few weeks ago. And you see that for the smallest package, the fair usage limit is 500 GB, and for the other packages, the fair usage limit is 1,000 GB. And thereafter, the speeds are toggled down to either 1 Mbps for the smaller package and 3 Mbps for the other packages. What this basically means is, as you pay for your 8 Mbps subscription package, you're buying 500 GB of full speeds. Thereafter, next, we have a look at Safaricom 4G home plans, which work on the same basis with 200 GB fair usage limits for the smaller package and 400 GB for the bigger package. And then after you exceed these limits, they're again throttled down to 1 Mbps. Telkom does the same. So for the unlimited daily plans, it's the first 13 GB, you get full speeds. Thereafter, there is a throttle down schedule that starts at 1 Mbps. As you increase the data you're downloading, lower again 512 kbps, and then it lowers down to 256 kbps. And finally, when you use 400 GB, it just caps and locks you out. Zuku and Fiber use the same system. So they have a fair use policy that automatically studies to see the mass data users and automatically toggles down their speeds by deprioritizing the browsing. So what is the case for fair usage policies? Are they necessary? The first point is fair access. So these fair usage policies ensure fair access to the service for all users of all networks at all times. Second, we look at appropriate uses for services. So for instance, you might find that internet service providers such as Safaricom forbid subscribers, the retail customers, from thereafter reselling the internet services that they have purchased. So by implementing these fair usage policies, they intend to curb resale of internet services by retail customers. Finally, we see the optimal network performance, which is to ensure that network performance is not adversely affected by extreme usage, where these mass data users just clog the system. What is the case against fair usage policies? So the case against fair usage policies is first, unfair competition practices. So ISPs with monopolies in specific regions may implement harsh fair usage policies because they know that customers do not have any other better options. Second, there are concerns over infrastructural deficits. So are ISPs taking on more clients than they can actually handle, and then thereafter implementing these fair usage policies as cover-ups because they cannot deliver full speeds for unlimited internet? We'll hear that later on from our esteemed panel. And lastly, we look at oversight and disclosure. So what are the processes that these ISPs use to determine these fair usage limits? And how do they disclose these fair usage policies to their subscribers? Should they continue to call these plans that have fair usage policies unlimited plans? Are they really unlimited plans? The emerging issues that arise from this, and some of them will be tackled, most of them we hope will be tackled in today's session is, first of all, is the internet a public utility? And if so, are these policies progressive or retrogressive? So you can choose to look at them as being progressive because they allow for, at the very bare minimum, access to the internet. But then they can also be retrogressive in the sense that, and this goes on into our second point, does throttling down internet speeds or capping data usage adversely affect meaningful connectivity for customers? So if you're looking at a student who has to attend classes every day and you have toggled down the speed to 1 Mbps, as much as they have access to the internet, is it really meaningful connectivity? Next slide. The third point is, what do these policies actually mean for heavy internet users who rely on peer-to-peer communication for school or work? We have talked about this. So does this mean that you automatically have to buy the biggest packages in order to ensure that you do not reach your fair usage limit? And lastly, what does the law say about FUPs? Do we have regulators who are looking into this implementation tactics? And can we find a balance between the business case and consumer needs for fair usage limits? So with this, I would like to welcome back our moderator, Selina, to take us through the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor, for that very elaborate presentation. I think you did a perfect job in setting the scene for our conversation today. For the next part of the session, we'll move into our panel discussion, where we'll allow our panelists 3 minutes to share their perspectives and experiences on home fiber and fair use policies in Kenya. First off, we'll start with Franklin Ocharo from Safaricom. Thank you, Franklin. Please take it away.
Thank you, Selena. Thank you, Victor. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to join this panel. I'll first start by thanking Victor for the good overview he's given on the case, also case against fair use policy, and just immediately address, say, the elephant in the room with the new policies that we just announced a few weeks ago. So just going back to what has been highlighted, the case for fair use is largely on the customer experience to ensure that we're able to deliver a great service to customers without a few users hogging the network, thereby impacting the experience of other users. And for this is based on how we've designed the network. We've designed the network to serve a certain number of users, and there's anticipated traffic that we expect to come from it. What happens is when you have one or few users generating abnormal traffic, then in essence, it affects the other users along the line. So what we've done in setting up a fair use policy is putting it at a limit that, having observed the usage of our customers, especially during the pandemic when we saw usage really go up, we looked at what point we believe a normal user can consume for the different packages if they're just doing their normal home office services. So for example, in the case of a student who's consuming that service, we've taken that assumption and seen they're on a video streaming server and they can do a bit of entertainment, then seeing they won't reach that fair use policy, and that's what we've used to set that limit. So the objective is not to limit customers, but in essence, to make sure we can provide great experience to all our customers. Second, why it has come at this point is when you're giving more speeds, it provides more opportunity for what I'd call redistribution of the service. And we also observed this when we doubled the speeds last year. And that's why, to make sure that we don't tell you, you now have higher speeds, then you experience worse experience because of the possibility of more traffic being injected into the network, we try to arrive at a position that can enable customers get these services better. Lastly, I'll talk on the business aspect of offering this service. And to point to that, looking at the numbers Victor just presented, in perspective, based on the 2019, the latest census we've had, we are covered just 3% of the households, all the operators put together. We are just at 3% coverage. Even if we say let's knock off all households without electricity, it's just 6% coverage. So we are still a long way. We still have a long way to go to providing fixed internet to households in this country. So how do we motivate investment in this sector? Motivating investment, we need to look at whether the providers can get a fair return based on the investment that has been made into it. And that's where reselling becomes an issue, because when you put out an investment, you connect, say, an apartment block of 50 homes, then 3 users take the top package and rewire the rest of the apartment block, then it means you are getting very little compared to what you expected out of it. And in turn, this then hinders continued investment out of this. And what we'd want is a balance between that. How do you have an ecosystem where you can offer the service, get a fair return out of it, which will then motivate investment and even attract more players into this country to connect homes. And that's why we look at the issue of reselling as bad for the industry as a whole, and not an issue that will just affect us. It will not just affect us directly. I think with those fair remarks, I'll pass back to you, Selena. Thank you.
Thank you, Franklin. I think that does address the elephant in the room. And thank you also for breaking down what went into the decision around resizing the packages. From our research, we found that on average, an average household uses around 350 gigs a month on home fiber subscriptions. That's all things considered, working from home, streaming services, downloads, and studying from home as well. So those are some insights I thought to share. Thank you so much once again. Next, we'll have Ben Roberts from Liquid Telecom just come in and share his perspective as Africa's largest independent fiber network. Thank you, Ben. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, I want to build on what Franklin said. So one thing, we as Liquid Telecom, we haven't got a great deal of fiber to the home in this country, but we've done pretty large deployments of fiber to the home in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Uganda, Rwanda. And, you know, I've been involved in a lot of the high level planning and strategy behind building out Pan-African network, and also, you know, some of these fiber to the home products. So it's exactly like Franklin has described, I think. But, you know, I want to sort of drill down into sort of some of the underlying principles behind these sharing things that we're talking about. So first of all, it was mentioned at the beginning in the opening presentation around you know, bandwidth being a highly scarce resource. Now, in a radio network like 3G or 4G or you know, satellite networks, the actual bandwidth is linked to a quantity of spectrum, which, you know, is in megahertz, but then you have a certain amount of data that can be delivered in megabits per second. You have what we call efficiency, you know, efficiency of the spectral efficiency of how many megabits you can deliver per megahertz. This is enhanced with you know, cellular infrastructures, and it becomes about how many base stations you put up. So, but ultimately you've got a, you know, what is a fairly tight and expensive resource. So you have to share that in a different way. So operators tend to share this by selling it by the gigabyte. They sell it by the quantity, just like electricity. If we sell electricity onto a grid, you know, we've got a resource. It's cost us money to generate that resource. So we sell that by the kilowatt hour, by the unit cost. When we get to home broadband fiber, the economics are actually type different. There's two economic factors, right? One is the cost of what we call it, you know, IP transit, international bandwidth, whatever you want to call it, but it's the cost per megabits per second of a bandwidth delivered at the data center by the speed. So there's a common practices in how this is calculated and how they're sold, but we have a certain cost, a wholesale market cost of 1 megabits per second at the major data centers in Nairobi costs. And then we have another piece of economics, which is the last mile economics. In the space of fiber to the home, it's around exactly, I mean, Franklin put it very well when he's talking about motivating investment and getting return on investment. You know, we can't build more, we'd love to build more fiber in Kenya, but we've not found sufficient return on investment to build fiber. This is why we've not built here. Safaricom have ventured into that, and we've done it in other countries. But you know, if you can't get return on investment, you can't carry on building more. And so each property you pass with fixed band or infrastructure costs you a certain amount per house passed. We say per house passed, and then you get an additional incremental amount per house connected. So let's say for each house passed, each house you put fiber to in Kenya, it might cost you around $500, 50,000 shillings for each home passed. Now, if you then pass 1,000 homes and 30% of those homes take up your service, then you've probably got a case for you know, return on investment there, and you can generate an acceptable business. If only 5% of homes take up those service, and you know, some of those just use more bandwidth and sell it to their neighbors, unfortunately, you don't have a business case for reinvestment. So it really kills this thing of resellers reselling on the network. They're not resellers, you know, they are they're buying a product which is designed for an individual, and then they are abusing that product to distribute it, you know, unfairly sharing across the network. They're not encouraging investment. We need, you know, more to be done about this, really. But they don't just resell bandwidth, but they do illegal things. You know, they use KPLC poles, they put their own fiber up, and they do dangerous things. You know, so we've had people cutting into our fiber, running it into KPLC poles illegally, and without any authorization from KPLC. This is a danger to public health. So let's not put these as any guys we want to defend here. I'm here to defend the industry and the broadband industry. And, you know, maybe there were a few, there are some legitimate users who might be heavy users of bandwidth, particularly video gamers can be higher users than others. They might be playing online. They might be online a lot of the time doing voice calls, video gaming, downloading large downloads. But really they're, the video gamers or families, large families who've got a lot of devices in the home, who mum and dad are watching Netflix while 5 kids are upstairs with their own tablets. They also might be a heavy user using it legitimately. But in the main, as Franklin described, we as operators, we do our homework. We find out what a normal user is going to be using. We set our product with acceptable limits and fair usage policies to cater for their needs. The 1 terabyte that is in these Safaricom packages is quite a lot. It's quite a generous offer. I'm not here to promote my competition, but it is quite a good offer, right? There are a few legitimate users who might use more than 1 TB. I'm probably one of those. I've got 50 or so devices connected in the house, smart TVs, audio systems, smart home, CCTV. I probably use a bit more than a terabyte, but not a lot more. But most people who are using over a terabyte are bad actors. People who are downloading movies to rip them onto DVDs so they can illegally sell DVDs and pirate copies. That's a good example. Resellers is another one. They're mostly people who are doing things that are not within the terms and conditions of the product, not legal things. But I think it is good to have look at what might be some of the legitimate uses, and we do have devices which can do more detailed allocations, so we can allocate more people more bandwidth for Zoom calls. We can allocate people more bandwidth for video gaming. We as operators, we differentiate ourselves by doing different packages in fair ways. Often we don't publish the details of FUPs, and it's been brave of Safaricom to publish their limits, but it's obviously developed some backlash. But I think I'm happy for us to be transparent, and more transparency should be encouraged.
Thank you, Ben, for expounding on what the business and infrastructural aspect looks like, as well as what reselling looks like. I think a lot of participants in the call might not even have had any idea about also how they're consuming their internet. So that's been great to hear from you. Thankfully, we have a regulator on the panel. We'll give them an opportunity to share some more insights in a bit. But before we proceed, I'd like to invite Liz Orembo to give us the stakeholder perspective. Liz is a representative from Kictanet. Thank you, Liz, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Celine, for this opportunity. First, I'd like to mention, as Celine has already mentioned, that I'm from Kictanet, and Kictanet is a multi-stakeholder platform that has stakeholders from government, regulators, Robin, service providers, and even CSOs. They come together to discuss ICT policy in the platform. And right now we are also having heavy discussions on fair usage policy, and the debate is quite interesting. So for the other viewers, how you can get into these conversations, you can go to our website, or you can also subscribe to Kictanet for you to give your feedback for the industry. Yeah, so that's a short introduction about Kictanet, and you said that I'm going to provide the views from the network or from the industry, but that's not it. What I'm going to say here is my own my own views, and not for any organization. Now, to be fair, ISPs, just like any other private company, are in this business to make profit. That means it has to make money sense at the end of the day. And when you are talking about fair usage policies, let's not just talk about the big players like Safaricom, Zuku, the ones who have already big shares in the market, but let's also talk about the small players, the ones who buy huge limited bandwidth from Akina Ben, and then they sell it to others. Some call them internet mutu, but some are just legit businesses. So yeah, And these players have been so important in the industry because they've also improved access, especially where the big players have done their studies and actually determined that it would not make a good business sense for them to distribute or to reach out their services in those areas. So they've actually come in and actually proven to these other big players that everyone actually has a thirst for unlimited internet. So when you look at Nairobi areas, usually it's first the small players who come in, and then after the market has grown, then you start seeing the bigger players now coming into to get into that share of the market. So we should also look beyond, and also when we are talking about these policies, also cover how these small players also covered in the fair usage policies, because most of these customers of the small players are also affected by the bandwidth, and usually they don't have these policies to regulate. So you find problems like network outage. So someone is using heavy bandwidth, and it's usually even a challenge for them. So yeah, the way everyone has just presented here, I think Safaricom, Zuku, and Telcom, Liquid Telecom, usually do a study before they come up with the capping of their internet, and let's say a household uses 350 gigs, the way you've just presented at Lawyers Hub, but that will also mean that the 3,000 package for the Safaricom will not fit for very many households. That will mean that for most households, they'll have to go for the higher packages. First, is that affordable for all the for most households in Kenya? Number two is fair usage policies punishes all users. The other thing that, the other alternative, which has also been laid out here and also Zuku uses, is to automatically detect the ones who are heavy bandwidth user and proactively cap their usage. And there are some concerns with this because, of course, there'll be privacy implications to that, and that's why the likes of Safaricom will put a blanket fair usage policy for everyone. That doesn't mean that that all users are punished. Just in case you go beyond that cap, that's when you'll have the throttling. So to that point, I've supported the private sector. Where I'll not really support them is how they develop the fair usage policies and how they implement them. It's a bit similar to what WhatsApp did. They knew that they had a bigger market share. They've had a bait for the users, and now they just give you policies on your face and with immediate effect. And they know that you can't opt out because you're heavily relying on that service, which is a very bad approach from an ethics point of view. When you're signing into a contract, you should have a reasonable amount of time for you to change into the other terms of that contract you're signing to, and you should also have consent. So to this case, there's no informed consent as per the from the user's point of view, because for example, in Safaricom, the policies are changed by March. And that means if you're a subscriber in the middle of the month, then what options do you have, even if you're a heavy bandwidth user? Yeah, so I don't think there was consumer information and just consent from that end, and that would be and that would raise a lot of ethical questions in it. Again, I think this one Ben mentioned in one of the conversations, I think on LinkedIn, that we still don't have infrastructure in place for heavy bandwidth user. And that really speaks a lot when it comes to the next generations of technologies and usage, things like 5G and IoT. That's something that you can look into by the regulator and even, of course, with assistance from the industry. Yeah, I think that's it for me. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Liz, for sharing your view on this particular topic. I think you've touched quite a bit on what the equitable thing looks like and the equitable thing to do looks like, and as well as the consumer protection aspect, which is great to allow us to segue into our final panelist for today, who is Robin Busolo from the Communications Authority. I think it would be great to have Robin come on board and share the regulatory perspective. Thank you, Robin. Sorry, Robin, it seems back. Thank you. Thank you. Can hear you.
Good afternoon, team. Good afternoon, my fellow panelists. Indeed, I appreciate your insightful views on this really sensational topic on fair usage of data. My name is Robin Busolo. I'm a lawyer. I work with the Communications Authority. Indeed, it's a great pleasure to receive communications from my Director General, Mrs. Masio. It's been a concern that this is indeed a key issue. As a regulator, I'll just give a brief overview of what Communications Authority is before I delve into the key issue that is under discussion today. Communications Authority is a regulator, is a statutory body set up under the Kenya Information and Communications Act, which was set up in 1998. It has a broad mandate spanning various responsibilities, regulating radio communications, which is a subject matter of discussion here, postal and courier services, cybersecurity, broadcasting, and beyond these key subsectors that are under regulation, within the purview of regulation, we manage competition within the ICT sector, and naturally, within regulation of competition, we have the interests of the consumers of ICTs in mind. So the Communications Authority, again, has an important mandate in protecting the interests of the consumers. Why is it important that the subject of ISPs is under the purview of the authority? Indeed, under the licensing function of the Communications Authority, we do license and regulate the telecommunications company, the data companies, Faricom, we have representation here, and the Aliquid, they're all beyond what we license them through a system called the Unified Licensing Framework, where now they can set up infrastructure and they can set up voice and data services. Beyond that, beyond the infrastructure license, we grant these telecommunications operators what we call an internet service providers license. And this license, upon successful application, this license comes inherent with terms and conditions therein. Now, once they become successful as internet service providers, they have the license conditions and terms, which beyond now the licensing functions, the authority has the mandate of compliance and ensuring that indeed there's conformity with the licensing terms and conditions. So in terms of now the ISPs rolling out the data services to their consumers, we have a tariff regulation mandate as well, where now whatever terms and conditions that they'll enter into with their subscribers, and whatever cost that the internet service provider will deem fit to charge the consumers, as a regulator, it behoves them to now come and file the intended cost with the regulator. So we have a tariff mandate, and it's guided and governed by what is contained in the Kenya Information Communications tariff regulations. So the ISPs have a responsibility to file their tariffs that they intend to charge the consumers with the communication, with the regulator for information. Whenever they file the tariffs or the cost that they intend to charge, it's been practiced that they reserve their rights to amend or change the terms and conditions that they intend to, that they've entered into the subscribers. So again, when it becomes necessary on the part of the ISP provider to change or amend the terms and conditions that they've entered into the subscriber. There's a procedure, again, in compliance with the license terms and conditions that they need to file with the Communications Authority, which internally we call a file and use doctrine. So whenever there's a proposed change of any term and condition, in this case, what we are discussing here is fair usage policy, is whenever they intend to change the terms under this doctrine of fair usage, all they need to do is communicate to the regulator the intended change for concurrence and information. You realize that the remit of the authority in terms of interfering with the proposed change is really limited, because the authority does not have, we're not privy to the terms and conditions within which the ISP provider will enter into between the ISP and the licensees. But in the event that the subscriber or the consumer is not happy or feels that the imposed change is detrimental, prejudicial, or unfair, again, within the regulator's consumer protection mandate, they are at liberty to come to the regulator and inform, or basically lodge a complaint, as it were, to the Communications Authority. We have a consumer complaints handling mechanism, where now once such a complaint or concern or observation as to a proposed change of policy is received, then we have internal mechanisms on how we'll ensure that this particular observation, concern, or complaint will be resolved at the end of the day. So it's in that regard that we will ensure that the interests of the consumers are protected, and the interests of our licensees are protected. So to that extent, the authority's remit is not, they cannot go beyond what is contained in the license terms and conditions, and we cannot interfere in the contract between the licensee and the subscriber. But the licensee, but the subscriber, at the end of the day, if he or she feels that is inconvenienced, he needs to approach the licensee as a first port of call. So you cannot ordinarily approach the Communications Authority, the regulator, as a first. If you have plans and that particular mechanism, if you feel unhappy, then come to the authority as a second port of call. Then we'll help as it is. But again, just to touch on what the panelists have said, there's need for consumer awareness on these issues. And so just to mention some key issues, it's important for a consumer to appreciate fair usage and what a data limit is concerned. So there's an issue of a data cap or allowance, which basically is a specific amount of data which you can use in each billing period, with penalties. So there's an appreciation, consumers need to appreciate distinctions between fair usage and the data limit. And the need further to appreciate that the existence of a data limit should be made very clear when you sign up to a broadband service. There's also need for consumers to appreciate what an acceptable usage is. So there's a doctrine of fair usage and there's a doctrine of acceptable usage. So again, it behoves now our licensees, the internet service providers, to go that extra mile and inform their consumers on these key issues. What is fair usage and what is acceptable usage? And the consumers further need to understand what is the impact of the fair use policy and what happens if you're affected. Then there are some options where you can decide now to either combat unusual data, you can decide now to either choose an ISP which has unlimited services. So all these things are, from a consumer perspective, is really a discretion issues. And I'll urge our internet service providers to actually do a lot of public awareness and stakeholder engagement with the consumers so that they appreciate these issues. Selina, I wish to cap my submissions on that, and I'll invite any observations and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. You've answered a lot of questions around what happens next. We're getting questions about where you can rewatch the webinar, just to clear the air on a few issues. This will be available on our YouTube channel, that's Lawyers Hub Kenya. We'll also be sharing a short clip just explaining what the ISP's fair use policies look like in Kenya, just in small bite-sized chunks for consumption after. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, that's Lawyers Hub Kenya. Next, I would like to invite Lawyers Hub CEO, Ms. Linda Bonyo. She will take us through the Q&A section. We see it's on fire right now, so I'll just hand back over to her. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Selina, and thank you to our dear panelists for the really useful feedback. We're really grateful for everyone who's joined in. The chat, I think, is lit. If you have a question, please feel free to ask on the Q&A tab. Selina didn't beg you enough, but I want to beg you to like our YouTube channel and subscribe so that when we go live, that you will be notified. So we hope that you can get some resources there. We have over 120 videos on tech policy, and that's, if you want to learn, that's a place to go to. So I have a few questions for our panelists. If you're on the chat, please feel free to use the Q&A tab. We'll also take audio questions. So I think I'll take the first round of questions. We don't have too much time. And so we'll go to, I see a few hands. Just lift up your hand and then we'll enable you to ask a question to our panelists. Please keep it brief, 30 seconds, and then we can proceed. I'm not able to follow the chat because there's so much happening, but I'm hoping that we can, is the Q&A tab, are they able to ask questions on Q&A tab? Oh my God, yeah, there are so many. So let's go to the hands that have been raised to ask the questions. So I think we have one question from Franklin. Franklin Sunday?
Yes. Yes. I've actually posted my questions on the chat, but I'll just read them out. They go to like all the panelists. So the first one is, how frequently are FEPs reviewed by Safaricom and Liquid Telecom? And the second one is, has Safaricom and other ISPs filed their FUP policies, including the latest changes to the CA? And then, is the regulator satisfied with the transparency of the formulas that they use? And then, is there a case for more regulation within the spirit of net neutrality?
Very much, Franklin, for those questions. I hope our panelists are noting them down. I think we'll go to the next question. We have Rono Kipkorir.
Yes.
Rono, please proceed.
You can hear me?
Yes, just speak up a little.
Okay. Thank you very much. My question is related to...
You're pretty low. We can hear you so well.
Hello. Better now?
You sound so peaceful. Yes, that's better.
Okay. My question is directed to the gentleman over at the Communication Authority. He said that the authority usually just focuses on after the consumer has come and complained about what has happened, in case there is any problem between him as the consumer and the ISP. My question is, shouldn't the regulator, in their purview of consumer protection, focus more on regulation because of the fact that there is actual misrepresentation where ISPs say that the service that they're offering is unlimited, yet it's not. In terms of there is hidden legalese language in the terms and conditions, and so you agree as a consumer, you consent, but yet you do not know what you're consenting to. You're just saying yes. Shouldn't the regulator?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rono. We'll take the final question from James Wamatai. James, please proceed.
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
My question is to the gentleman from Safaricom and also from CA. It just feels like this is a reaction to a few bad apples, and I'm just wondering why everyone else is suffering. Just because there are people who are reselling. There should be a policy. In my opinion, there should be a policy, to be able to punish, people who are misusing, their service. There are many people who actually, based on what he said, overuse, but then it's for their own personal use. They game, they download stuff. Maybe they're photographers, etc. So why is everyone else suffering because of a few bad apples? Safaricom did this before when they killed the unlimited mobile package, and they did that because of the same thing, because of a few people who are actually misusing that by over downloading. And then my question to the CA gentleman is, how do we complain? What is a mechanism for complaining about terms and conditions or a service that that an ISP is providing? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, James Wamadhai, and he represents Bloggers Association of Kenya. So thank you very much for asking those questions. I also want to back up your last question on, are there very specific forms that people need to use to complain? What's the procedure? How long is it going to take? Can you fix this before the 1st of March? When the Safaricom terms and conditions, terms of service come, the new terms of service come to play. I take this issue personally. I first got to use Safaricom Internet a few years ago when it was pretty new in the market. And they said it's free to set up. They gave us one additional month, one free month to use. And so I went and told all my relatives, I told all the estates, then I moved to a new estate. I recruited everyone. I was the first in that estate. It had about 300 houses. And they all came in and took Safaricom Internet because I sold it to them. So I actually did biz dev for Safaricom. And now to hear that setting up means you pay 3,000 shillings, in setting up, there's no free month. Number two, they also indicate that if you lose your router, you pay 6,000 Kenya shillings. So I need to figure out, if I'm moving houses, how to move with that router. I don't know. I think that's pretty unfair when you're late in the game. I agree with Wamathai. I also used the postpaid service when I think I was in university then. And we talked about it. We convinced people to come on board. We paid 1,000 shillings and spoke endlessly. And then our free minutes disappeared. And I feel that Safaricom is doing the exact same strategy that Facebook does. Get you on board, build a community around it, and then pull off all the free things, and then get you to another class. I see from the terms and conditions that Safaricom have introduced something called Fiber Home Plus, which costs, I think, 1,000 shillings more, So why not just introduce that extra layer of service rather than affect everyone else who's on this particular platform? And to Ben Roberts, we're just comparing what has happened with WhatsApp and Signal, where people just get agitated and say, we don't have to be on this platform. And so if you don't care about our privacy, you're going to Signal. And so we had so many downloads of the Signal app, and people trying out Telegram as well, which they weren't even thinking about because they were sold to WhatsApp. Is this an opportunity for Liquid Telecom to really consider going into homes and just not commercial use, and also to really take a keen look and, how do you get the usual, people? If you love our internet today, it's courtesy of Liquid Telecom at the Lawyers Hub, and we're really happy with that particular service. But you offer only that commercial service. You're not big on homes. How do we then move to a place where we don't have a market monopoly and have different players actually playing to get this, to get us to a level where we don't rely on just one particular platform? I appreciate all the questions, so I will try and summarize all the questions, and then we try and wrap this up before 1:30 because some people have to go for lunch. Franklin Ocharo says there are customers who are paying 13,000 shillings for platinum. The speeds are high at 100 Mbps. And they commit the kind of money to ensure that their experience is superior. Capping their usage to 1 TB and downgrading it to 3 Mbps after them going on the cap seems unfair to them. How are you planning to address this particular customer? And Franklin, as we talk about that, we want to understand, if I'm watching a YouTube channel, or maybe I'm streaming on Netflix, how much data am I using? And do you envision that I'm going to get there? If I'm not going to get there and it's just 90% of us, actually 10% who are going to resell, don't you just let this be done with and find out a way in which if somebody is reselling, then ban that particular user rather than affect the 90% of us who are not doing this. I also find it ridiculous that you don't allow more than 2 routers in the same house within your terms of service. So I think let's pause on the next set of questions because there are too many. I will go first to Franklin on the technical aspects. We come to Ben Roberts, and then we come to Robin. Please keep it under 2 minutes if you can.
Okay, thank you, Linda, and thanks everyone who's had their questions. So I'll try to address a number of them. Maybe I'll combine a few. I've also seen a couple in the Q&A part. So the first, I think when it comes to the question of FUP, and Victor did a good job to show the policies that are in play, and we say this is a general best practice, not just locally, but also globally with other players. What has really come up is the transparency in what exactly we are doing in that fair use policy. As we know, at least for the home service, it's a shared connection. And it's a shared connection. It means there are many users who are using that service, and other users can be impacted by what the people they're sharing that connection with do. So what then we've done with this is to provide that full transparency, because again, you can implement just traffic engineering. And in this case is what we said, when it's peak time and traffic is high, slow down some users, slow down some applications. You can do different things to try and deliver good practice. We tried to simplify it for our customers, to just put it plain out, will not slow down some applications or anything. This is just the limit that we believe should be enough for a typical home user in that package. And as I said, this was based on what we observed users doing. And the differentiation in the different packages, for example, going to the smallest package, the bronze, where we've put a 500 GB fair use policy, our average in that package is actually 200. So we've put more than double on that package. So the 350 is when you combine it with the bigger packages. So that's the main essence of this, that we've already observed, and you are saying for normal home use, you're not putting this to punish customers, but we've seen for normal user, this limit should be sufficient for you. What if you want bigger than that? What if you don't want to be restricted by it? I've said there are packages for customers who, yes, want to do 20,000 GBs or 20 terabytes. For that, the suited package for it is a dedicated link, where in this case, you get a link dedicated to you. You can push as much as you want. You're not sharing it with anyone. And of course, when we offer you that kind of dedicated link, it means it will be priced appropriately. What we say is that we need to balance between what we are offering and also the affordability, the pricing of our products. If we decide to say everyone gets a dedicated link, do anything you can do with it, then the price will be out of reach for most players. And that's why we have this balance.
So what Noela Lagat is asking, that the package that you're saying is for home user, looks like it's targeted at one person. It's not for work from home and remote work, because assuming a family of 5, now you have some children attending school on Zoom, you have somebody else playing a game, you have maybe a mother attending a meeting, father is in another room attending a meeting. Do you think the bronze is actually enough for them, or they need to invest in that, a well-priced package for a dedicated link?
No, so for bronze, see, the bronze was already there last year at the peak. Yeah. When all this, when on lockdown, everyone was at home, usage was at its highest in July last year. That's when we observed the highest peak we've ever seen. Then after that, so it grew to July, then started, now it's much lower actually compared to what it was in July. And we based our fair use policy on the highest we've ever observed at those levels, when everyone was at home, all these things were running, there's schooling, there's entertainment, there's all these things happening at home. So we are confident. And I think an extra step we are taking, because there's the fear that, and for a normal user, you'll say, my television is permanently on YouTube. Even if I'm not there, I know it's unlimited, I leave it running. So I don't really worry about it. What we are taking as an extra step, we had intended to have this when we take this live in March, but we are bringing it forward. And by tomorrow, we'll now provide a USSD link, where as a user, you can check. I'm scared, I think I use, I don't know, I think I use 2,000 GBs. You can now check, and we'll show you, based on your usage, this is the average you actually use. Then we believe that will give you some comfort when you actually understand whether these are FUPs within your average usage or not. Yeah. So
Franklin, I'm just gonna say this. Not everyone actually understands how even speeds work, and just the technicality of it. So what that will do is people will start thinking through, Itaisha, I don't have to use this particular internet. Yet the world is moving towards, let's say, work from home. If you look at the way India is outsourcing resources to, their talent and software developers abroad, people are actually doing that. Do you think you made the switch because you lost out on commercial clients, because we were no longer at offices and we are all working at home?
No, I said, in fact, the need to make this is, we've seen more people moving to home, working from home, requiring higher speeds. So the main change we're actually making in this proposition is making sure that the speeds are better to serve the different needs. But the side implication of it is that when you offer the side speeds and you have people who can push up normal traffic, then it will make the normal users not even enjoy those increased speeds that you're offering. That's why it was important.
Jacob Kinyua is saying that he's surprised that those who don't know how much data they're using are very concerned about the new limits. It's because it was advertised as unlimited. When you tell somebody, I will take you to the moon, we don't know the distance, but we want to get to the moon. When we get there, we'll know we're at the moon. So I think you need to drop the whole branding around unlimited internet, because I think it's deceptive.
Fair use policy does not make the service not be unlimited, because you are saying we are just applying a policy of how much you can use at the full speed. After that, we are reducing to 3 Mbps, but it's still unlimited. And 3 Mbps, in fact, there are packages that are 3 Mbps from the beginning. If you look at the 4G propositions, they are just 3 Mbps. And if you are telling you, once you hit the 1 terabyte, you still have the 3 Mbps speed, and you can continue pushing as much as you want. So what is just...
I'm hoping that Safaricom would invest, as you know, the way you advertise Bongana, Safaricom, and those other products, that you would advertise these terms and conditions. And I hope that the capital, CA would also be keen on looking at, is there, consumer education around these terms and conditions, so people actually know that even reselling is a problem, because I think some of these people are doing this as a business opportunity without necessarily knowing that they're not supposed to be resellers of this particular products. Let's go to Ben Roberts. And I'm going to ask the very same question on how do we create competition, one, within this particular market, and ensure that we don't have monopolies where we are leaning on one particular product and it looks like we just can't do without it. And also, two, how do we have government intervene to get the cost of data down? I know Kenya is privileged. We have really good internet, the infrastructure, and the price is not very prohibitive, but it's still expensive. We're not as connected yet. Are there costs that we incur in terms of taxes the moment we pay for our home fiber or even internet use at the office? Ben?
Okay. Before I come to those questions, I just want to pick on some of the questions from the audience and a few things, expand a bit on what Franklin has said. So, this thing, the difference between a dedicated link and a broadband link, unfortunately isn't understood well by consumer, because it's a bit complicated, right? It is actually a complicated thing for us to convey to the consumer, because the differences are complex and they're about how we provision it in the network. Now, you're using a dedicated link from us, Linda, right? But another partner in the media space who was doing a webinar with in December, they were using a broadband link from, not from Safaricom, but one of the other broadband guys. And they were uplinking to a webinar like this, and it was breaking up. And they thought they'd bought a business class package, but they hadn't. They'd bought a home broadband package, which is asymmetrical, doesn't upload as much as it downloads. They actually moved to an unlimited package. But, if you have 100 GB unlimited, purely unlimited dedicated link, you can download maximum 30 terabytes a month from that link. That's the maximum the laws of physics allow you to download. So we're talking about, if you're maxing 100 megabits per second for a whole month, you'll only get 30 TB of data. But in order to do that, in order for us as a service provider to give that to somebody, we have to give them a piece of dedicated equipment that other people don't share. So we have to put in pieces of equipment and interfaces and cards so that it isn't shared by other people. They're not fighting with somebody else for that. In order to bring the price down, we use other equipments that share the data. This is what brings this all about. And that's the reality of it. If you buy a dedicated link that is 100 megabits per second, it's going to cost you more than Safaricom's home 100 megabit per second link, even more than 4 times as much, most likely. And we do get consumers who don't understand what they bought. They buy a home broadband link and they think they're going to get this, and they become special cases. When they phone up to say, hey, this is no good, we guide them on the process and say, well, really, you bought the wrong package here. Here is the one you should be buying. And most business customers who need this, heavy users, will say, okay, I understand. I'll pay a bit more. I'll get a business package. The resellers, unfortunately, don't. They just refuse and carry on. And then they buy more modems and put them in the house. That's why Safaricom are limiting the number of modems in the house. So really to the question of the person who was saying, why are people suffering when there's a few bad actors? You're not suffering. Imagine you're getting water, you're at the bottom of the hill, and the river's flowing down the hill, and one farmer at the top of the hill takes all the water out of the river to irrigate his fields. You don't get any water. If you regulate and limit the amount of water he takes out of that pipe, you get water. You're benefiting because it is being controlled by FUPs. The benefit is there. You're not suffering, you're benefiting. You're still getting high speeds, you're still getting good quantities of water, way more water than you need. But it's because of that. And net neutrality has come up in this question. And FUPs don't necessarily breach net neutrality. Normally we might say, we might limit the speed, we might go to more complex FUPs. We might limit the speed of video, we might limit the speed of peer-to-peer. Net neutrality only comes in if we say, oh, well, we're getting money from Netflix, so we're going to allow a lot of bandwidth for Netflix, but for Showmax, we don't get money, so we will limit the bandwidth for Showmax. And nobody's doing that in Kenya. Nobody is doing this uncompetitive practices. This is something this is an issue from America, the United States, where Comcast, a big cable TV provider or a broadband provider, and there's been wars between cable TV providers, content providers, and broadband providers. We're not having that same. It's not even a debate. We're not even having that in the industry in Kenya because we're not competing in that way. So coming to your question, really, how do we encourage more competition? So, the fact is that when it comes to deploying infrastructure, it isn't economically viable to implement new infrastructure where somebody already has infrastructure and has a good market share. So if somebody builds infrastructure in a certain estate and they get 40% of subscribers, it isn't attractive for Liquid Telecom to come and build infrastructure in the same place. If we go and build infrastructure to connect our people, we'll go somewhere else. So competition becomes regionalized and competition is there. So there are multiple players that have fiber. We have some small areas of fiber to the home. Zuku has, JTL have, Safaricom have, so the competition exists. It is a game for subscribers, and the competition comes about from going to different areas. If we want to bring, unfortunately, people think that's a monopoly. They think I'm in a certain area, I can only get Safaricom, and so people think there's a monopoly and they haven't got a choice. But the reality is, we are competing. We are building out fiber. Liquid Telecom, we built some areas actually that we in fact lease the fiber to Safaricom, and Safaricom provide their home broadband services on some of our fiber in some areas. So that is actually what's going to have to happen for competition. If we were interested to do fiber to the home in Lavington, right, we wouldn't go and build out new fiber infrastructure in Lavington. We know Safaricom have fiber in Lavington, and we would call Safaricom, their wholesale department, and we say, hey, can we lease your fiber? And just like we lease some of our fiber to you, can we lease some of our fiber to? The mechanisms of competition are there, so we can do that already. And how should government intervene? Government have done a lot of good things to bring down the cost of bandwidth, and namely the government invested in the subsea cables as a private-public partnership with operators from the very beginning, and the Teams cable. Government have done really good things. They've been supportive of internet exchanges and the Kenya Internet Exchange being in Kenya. Government are doing the right things, and I don't think there's anything more they should be doing. That they've built fiber optic cables for us all to use at economic costs. They can maintain those a bit better. The NOFB systems that the government have built have suffered from poor maintenance from the way they've contracted out to one of the operators. So government, if they want to do something better, they can apply better maintenance to the fiber optic cable that they have built.
Thank you very much for that. And why isn't Liquid Telecom offering fiber to the homes? It's just in certain areas. Why not the expansion in the different areas?
We're a Pan-African company, and we have a pretty big budget for investment in infrastructure and things. So we've mainly concentrated that in other countries who've given us better returns. So we found more attractive returns on investment in other countries for fiber to the home. So we've dedicated that investment money into those countries.
Very interesting. Please tell the other countries as well that Kenya exists. There's a market that has been taught that they can have internet at home, reliable internet at home, and we need competition. I think if you look at the uptake of home fiber, people love it. People are now working from home, especially the young generation, and that's going to be the bulk of consumers in the next few years. So I hope that your company as well as other companies can actually get into the market. And I'm sorry, Franklin, if I sound like I gave up on your company, but I'm still using Safaricom at home. So there's I think there's a comment here about there's a quick poll before we get to Robin Busolo from Communications Authority. There's one poll that we'd want to ask you. Would you pay double for the bronze package to keep it unlimited? So Franklin, this is for you. We're just asking people, would you pay double so that you keep the same unlimited for you, at home? Assume it's any other package. But this question was suggested by DJ Coman, who's on the call, and he just said, we would love to know, would you pay double to maintain it at unlimited? We are gonna close the question. We have 40% who voted. If you haven't voted, we're gonna end this in about 5 seconds. So we have 47% of you who voted. Please get it at 50 so that it's a clear African election. Would you pay double for the bronze package to keep it unlimited? There's 58% of you that have voted, and 84% say no, they wouldn't pay double. I don't know what you could deduce from that, but let's go to Robin and the regulatory question. One, I love the question by Ali on the chat, and he asked this: what are you doing with the Universal Service Fund? Can you utilize it in order to get this particular problems fixed? We also have number 2 on how long can this take if you really want to engage as the members of the public and let CA know that we are not pleased by the change of terms of service, and this is no longer unlimited because of this fair usage policy. What can we do? Can it be fixed before the 1st of March? And any other questions that have come in. And also the public education question, I see what Kelvin Murithi indicated. And then also I think Felix Atandi has talked about what is advertised and actually what's delivered. There are some other suggestions on how we can have Safaricom or Liquid Telecom to have an application or a USSD code in which you monitor your usage. And I'll get back to Franklin on usage. I think Safaricom was attempting to do Safaricom Home and do gas as well. I'm not sure I want to use Safaricom gas because, man, it can run out, and then I'm told it's not unlimited. Let's go to you, Robin.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Linda. And thank you very much for the participants and their concerns and questions. Linda, before I go to your question on yourself, I wish to respond to questions which were raised earlier by, I cannot recall them, but I got understood the question. It was twofold. One was on basically regulation of ISPs, and secondly on the question of complaint handling mechanism. I'll start with the first one. Once upon the licensee, now this is Safaricom and Liquid Telecom, I alluded to a unified licensing framework where they have a network facility provider license to enable them roll out infrastructure countrywide. They have an application service provider's license for applications, and they have what is called a content service provider's license to enable them disseminate content on the platform. Now, then inbuilt in this is now what now we call the ISP license, which we grant them upon payment of a certain amount of fees, and this license contains some terms and conditions. What we do now as part of regulation exercise is that we do monitoring and compliance, so that annually they are expected, our licensees are naturally expected to provide their returns in form of compliance return forms. And what we basically check is that we ascertain that whatever they've done in the course of the year while they're rolling out that particular service conforms to the terms and conditions of service that we've done. If it's in respect of a voice service, Then we have a regulatory tool called a quality of service monitoring tool, where now this tool basically enables the regulator to ascertain the levels of service. And the objective of this quality of service monitoring tool is basically to measure the quality of service and the quality of experience from a user perspective. So to that end, we just receive these compliance returns, which they regularly file with us before they pay their annual operating fees. So that's the role of the regulator in that regard, in ensuring that these licensees, that in the case of the subject matter of discussion here, is that the ISPs, that whatever terms and conditions that are contained in the license, that they comply with. So to that extent is the regulator's ambit. On complaints handling, again, we have a whole consumer and the public affairs department. And beyond this internal administration, we have a regulatory mandate to ensure that the consumer concerns are protected. So what happens is that there's a format which is called Chukua Tua, where now consumers who are aggrieved by the services, who are dissatisfied by the services of the licensees, have a portal to lodge a complaint with the regulators. It's called Chukua Tua. You lodge a complaint via this email, chukuatua@ca.go.ke. So you can lodge a complaint via email. You can write formally, and in this age of COVID-19, we encourage paperless with online complaints. So you lodge a complaint first to this website, and upon receipt of this complaint, we have internal processes where if a complaint has been lodged via email, we have in our service charter processes, we have to dispose of this particular complaint within a day. If the complaint emanates from the consumer itself, and the complaint relates to a situation where the complainant, the consumer is aggrieved by a service provider's issue. If it's a complaint relating between, it's a complaint that concerns a service provider with a service provider. In this scenario, if Liquid is having an issue with Safaricom, if it's a complaint of that nature, then we have a time period of about 3 days within which we're supposed to dispose of that complaint. But before, and I wish to reiterate that before, the first port of call is not the communications authority. The first port of call is that the consumer himself or herself needs to exhaust that particular mechanism with the service provider. So if you have an issue with telecom, with Jamii Telecom on their fiber, if you have an issue with Liquid Telecom, if you have an issue with Safaricom, if you have an issue with Zuku, then exhaust that complaint mechanism that they have built in their processes. Then if you're dissatisfied, then you have an avenue to come to the communications authority. Then we'll dispose of within the time limits or time frame that we've set out in our service charter. So we do that regularly. Regarding the question of Universal Service Fund, maybe I wish to bring to the attention of participants that this is a fund which has been established under the law. And the essence of this fund basically is to bridge the digital divide. There are areas which are deemed unserved, and there are areas which are deemed underserved. So Safaricom is here will tell you that there are areas which they feel are not economically viable. So because the regulator mandate is to ensure that these areas need to have access, so we leverage on the fund and we use a principle of subsidy to give them money to enable them access to this underserved and underserved area. The implementation strategy which the authority has in place, and the objective of this implementation strategy is to connect schools in terms of broadband connectivity. And we've just completed phase 1 of this process, where around 886 public secondary schools were earmarked for connectivity. And basically, what the school needs to do is just ensure that they're internet ready, and even Liquid is here, they're part and parcel of that process. Safaricom is part and parcel of that process, and they provide broadband connectivity to the schools. So beyond the school connectivity projects, we have now the voice infrastructure projects. Again, phase 1 was completed. How do you identify these areas which are unserved? There was some consultants which was done, which called a study called an access gap study, which basically revealed areas within Kenya where there's no connection, which has no connectivity. And these are the areas which now, once the contracts are awarded to our telecommunication service providers, they roll out to these particular areas. So the fund so far is focused on voice infrastructure. You must have heard in the news last week that the Communications Authority gave out contracts to about 5 companies on phase 2 of the voice infrastructure projects. Yeah. So,
but that means that we for unlimited data and home fiber use, we don't qualify for universal service charge, for universal service fund. You're on mute.
At the moment, no. But
okay.
At the moment, no, because the focus is now on the school broadband connectivity projects and the voice infrastructure projects, which focuses on areas which are unserved and underserved.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Robin. There was something on the chat. Somebody said that, you kept breaking. So is Communications Authority also, you've reached your max. So already the fair usage policy applies for your internet because it's pretty slow as you were speaking. But I see a few comments on the chat and I'll just bring them up a little bit on especially the way forward as Liz comes on. And we have people saying, Rono is saying, let's lodge a complaint in 3, 2, 1. Let us all complain. It's time we pushed back. And because we are such a negotiating country, are we able to negotiate that price with every provider? How are you actually doing public participation? Because I think from Article 10 of the Constitution, there needs to be public participation for making of laws. I think we need to get to that point where we actually discuss with stakeholders on terms of service, if that's important. But somebody will argue that this is a private company, they do what they would like to do. We have some comments here on exactly how to engage moving forward. There's suggestions around what I would just keep saying capital markets, but for a Communications Authority, what needs to be done? Can you have a proactive approach rather than wait for people to fill forms? Can you monitor the market and do digital listening on what's happening? I think that will also help us. The final question that we're going to be handling, and Liz would handle this, is how do we organize and how do we get this done? If you would like to engage on the next steps, one on terms, just re-examining and maybe writing opinion pieces, engaging with the ISPs, please let us know on the chat. You can inbox any of the Lawyers Hub team that's on the chat right now, especially the hosts, and then we'll be able to get back to you and see how we can work together on this. We feel that there's really little engagement on the area of tech policy, especially with infrastructure and communication. So we'd really love for you to get involved on this particular discussion. And also, two, we'd want to figure out, what are the next steps that CA can do? Can we engage even further? We have over 40 questions that were asked. There were about 545 people who signed up for this particular webinar. And we are live on Twitter, on Facebook, and also on YouTube. And so we would want to continue this discussion, let people know, so they just don't call an installer and say, uko nyumbani, nakuja kuinstall. We need to ask the question that where is the terms of service? What does it mean? Do I actually own the router? As people say sometimes, we don't own our iPhones. If you have an iPhone, you simply have rented it and they decide when they want to do a software update or not. Can we get to a point where consumers actually ask questions and that these questions are answered and that we keep to account the providers for these particular technologies? And so I'm going to just hand over to Liz, who will let us know exactly on what are the next steps. And then Selina will come and wrap up this discussion on the way forward. But thank you very much. And Liz, please come on board.
Thank you so much, Linda. First, I'd like to respond to questions on the monopoly. And just to say that one thing that COVID-19 made us realize is that the internet is next to a basic service. There are sectors in this economy that literally froze because we didn't have enough connectivity throughout the country. And an example of that is the education sector. So I know we are a bit optimistic that market forces will respond to unfair practices, but when you have only 5 players, then I don't think market forces will do much, and that's where there's a need for the regulator to come in, and even the government to start considering how other alternatives, be it community networks, be it even them providing services at subsidized rates, so that those who can't fight the market forces can actually get internet as a service, then I think it would be a good point to start from there. That said, what Linda has promised you that I will tell this webinar. KICTANet, as I already said, the KICTANet has discussions around the fair use policy, and it's actually a long engagement. The next steps, we are going to collect views, and I think we can also collect views with also Lawyers Hub, and come up with a way that we can engage the sector, the private sector, and even the regulators as well. So what you can do right now, Linda or the Lawyers Hub will share a link where you can subscribe to KICTANet and bring in your views about the fair use policy and any other thing with regards to the topics of this webinar. And then from there, we'll see the next steps, we'll outline the next steps, who to engage, and the next activities that will come out of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Liz. This is shaping up to be quite the discussion. And we have just a few minutes before we close. And just based off the engagement we've had and the conversation that we've had in the room, we would like to have some closing remarks from our panelists. We've run out of time. We wish this conversation was much longer, but we can always have a part 2 and reconvene maybe when things are, when the air is a bit clearer. But I'll just hand over to Frank to share what he thinks is the best way to go forward, just following from the conversation and the experience at Safaricom. Thank you so much, Frank.
Thank you, Selina, and thanks all for the great discussion. So to close, I'd say to reiterate that fair use policies are in place to ensure the greatest experience for our customers, and is to manage to make sure the network is available to offer that experience to all. We place the limits based on our observation of the normal users, and this is something we can keep observing and seeing if that changes. We expect maybe with the introduction of more application or more bandwidth hungry, that might change, but based on where we are now and our study, we believe the limits that are placed at a good position. And we say the alternatives to get dedicated links with no limits, which will cost more, but then if your usage is that high, like for business, then it makes a case for a customer to do that. And finally, I'd say the way to encourage competition, the way to get more players into this market, as we all want to be, it's not even competition, is to increase coverage. Before we say I want to get 3 players in my estate, you still have 97% of the households that are not covered, is to make it attractive for these players to come in. If Ben Roberts here hears that when people relocate, they throw away their routers and we offer them another free router, he'll never be interested in coming into this business, because those are a lot of costs that you are getting in and not recouping. So some of these things will make the environment okay, and it will attract more investments from the existing players to extend coverage and new players to come in. And this will be good for us as a country as a whole. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Frank. It's been a pleasure hosting you today. I think it's the first time we've had you at the Lawyers Hub, but you're most welcome to come on board at another time. But thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's been great. Actually, it's my dad who brought this conversation to my attention. I had no idea that you guys were changing your policies, but having you here has been very eye-opening for me as well. Next, we'll have Ben to just come in and share what he thinks is the ideal scenario. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't really, I think I have to end by just really wholeheartedly agreeing with Franklin's last point. This isn't, we've had a good debate here, and people are asking about universal service funds and when am I going to get high-speed broadband? These are the types of questions we should be asking. And if Safaricom, we shouldn't be asking, if Safaricom have put fiber in Lavington, why can't I buy from somebody else who's got a higher FUP? I mean, it's not the debate, right? If you're in Lavington and you've got fiber from Safaricom, that's great for you, right? But if you are in, I see my friend Twahir Hussain, who's down near the coast, he's saying we haven't got broadband here, and how do we get broadband to him? How do we get broadband to all the towns and cities, and then the rural areas of Kenya? What we must do as an industry in the way we compete with each other, and the way we are supported by our regulator with universal service funds and things like this, is work out how we expand our coverage, how we go to areas, and how we make good economic cases to go to areas where people need broadband but don't yet have it. And you know, we have good statistics on you know, the amount of people that apparently have broadband in Kenya. We maybe overcount some of these statistics because people have multiple mobile phones, but you know, people have come online with mobile phones and got in a mobile first world and got internet using the mobile phone, and that is great. That was great until 2020, and suddenly we needed a bit more in 2020, and we needed to be educated at home and work from home. And I see Robin is in a barn. Looks like, you know, he looks like he's not even in an office. He was there. I was on a webinar with him the other day. I think he was in the same barn. But you know, we need to be able to go and do things from on the internet from whatever place we're in, and that means we need higher capacity connectivity for our home premises, and we will continue consuming lots more mobile data. When we're on the go, we're on the bus, we're in the car, we're in the matatu, we'll continue consuming vast amounts of data on the mobile phone. But we really need to have, you know, higher, faster, reliable home services. And as I say, we put most of our investments into this into other countries. We found better returns on investment there. The more you know, Kenya can change. The uptake has been high. We've seen high uptake, and we have been upgrading. In fact, our some of our wireless networks. We have fixed wireless broadband networks which give you dedicated speeds, and we've been upgrading some of those, you know, with the blessing of our regulator, the CA. So, you know, it is this for me is the important conversation. Is you know, I'm more worried about the people who haven't got internet. It's not fair for them. I'm less worried about the people who have got very fast internet and they're moaning about unfair FUPs.
Thank you so much, Ben. And that also just starts a bit on our conversation we had a few months ago on what meaningful connectivity looks like together with the Alliance for Affordable Internet. And it's actually quite interesting to note that Robin was also on the panel on that specific day. So it's more about what does meaningful connectivity actually look like in the region. So that's a conversation we are furthering as well. And we'll be having a session similar to what we had at the forum on internet freedom for Africa together with Zipesa a few months ago. So thank you so much, Ben, and it's always a pleasure having you at the Lawyers Hub. We're looking forward to the time when you will be available to come into the space physically soon. Next, I'll just hand over to Robin to just share what he thinks his views as a regulator from a regulatory standpoint. Thanks, Robin. Take it away.
Thank you, Selina. Thank you, Robert, for your insightful remarks. From a regulator perspective, we really support the data companies, and in light of the publication of the new ICT policy, we have in place a digital economy blueprint. A strategy is being developed to how to deliver this digital economy. We need to appreciate the role of ICTs in this era of automation, not only in this specific area where we have a pandemic. So we cannot underestimate the role of our telecommunication service providers and the role of our data companies in ensuring that we are connected. We know ICTs is one among the key goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. And as a regulator, we are looking at how we can improve our regulatory ways to ensure that indeed we deliver this issue of a digital economy. We are at the level where we've come up with regulatory responses, especially in the COVID-19 eras. I'll urge participants to visit the CA website to appreciate what the authority has done so far in terms of ICT COVID-related responses, not only from an ICT or internet broadband connectivity perspective, but in all other areas, broadcasting, courier, e-commerce, etc. So again, I've taken the concerns from the participants. I'm reading the chat. They're really insights, and I'll take this home. I'll share with our Director General, and in fact, I'll brief the management and the board at large on the concerns raised by the participants and how we feel that we can relate with our licensees, the ISPs in question, to ensure that our citizenry have better services in terms of internet connectivity. And again, a good point is on how we can leverage on the role of the Universal Service Fund to ensure that our licensees, the internet service providers, the data companies can have internet fiber to home connectivity as a fundamental right to every Kenyan. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Remember, we are always open to engaging and collaborating as a Lawyers Hub on consolidating these remarks and sharing them with the Communications Authority, all for the greater benefit of the public. We've been seeing a lot of comments that I do agree with in the chat section around internet as a basic human right. Times are changing, and even a few 2 or 3 decades ago, it was hard to imagine that this would be considered a basic human right. And there's been a lot of discussions around taxing the internet as a luxury tax. And I see Liz has answered some of those questions, and she stated that Kitanet is working on that, and we need more people to advocate for tax-free internet. It is no longer a luxury. I cannot emphasize that enough. I would like to hand over to Liz to share some of our closing remarks as we head out to the end of this webinar. Thank you, Liz. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Lawyers Hub, the team, for providing this platform for us to come and discuss about the fair usage policy. Usually ICT issues usually emerge rapidly, and that usually requires a lot of capacity from organizations to respond to them. For example, the Safaricom's policy would have just gone if not for one person just to raise it up on Twitter and people to be like, hey, this is actually changing and it will actually affect my cost and how I'll be using the internet. So we advocate for more people being on high alert for such issues as they come up rapidly. And at Kitanet, we also provide that platform where you can also raise such issues, and then we take them on and provide a platform where people can discuss and then follow up on different stakeholders for actual action points. Yeah. So I thank Lawyers Hub for this. This has been a very wonderful discussion, and also our audience for listening through the 2 hours and also for an engaging discussion on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's been a pleasure having you with us today. Just as we wrap up, the team here at the Lawyers Hub, we were able to just consolidate all comments and based off our research, come up with what we think would be the greatest next steps following this conversation. And the first thing we thought is, how does the complaints procedure look like to the Communications Authority? Is it possible to have this procedure published in a way that is easy to understand for each consumer? And where can the consumers gain access to this? Maybe Robin will share in the chat, but this will also form part of the explainer video that we'll be sharing in a few days' time. Second is, how can ISPs engage consumers in the development of these policies? And how can we ensure that there's public participation in these policies? Because at the end of the day, away from the business, these policies also affect the consumer greatly. The third thing is, how can ISPs publicize this information on these policies and enhance consumer awareness? It's very commendable to see what Safaricom is doing, sharing the notice about the fair use policies online on their website. But what can we do to ensure that that consumers have access to this information, and it's not something that they come to hear about much later once they have opted into these packages? And the fourth thing is, maybe we need to consider what exactly is the definition of unlimited, and do we need to take out the word unlimited to avoid a situation where there's misrepresentation to consumers? That's something worth noting. And the fifth and final thing is something that actually came out in the chat and something we're interested in hearing more about. Is it possible for us to have small and medium enterprise packages for internet connectivity for young and budding entrepreneurs? How can they ensure that their businesses stay online in a way that is affordable and easy to access even as they continue to scale? So these are some of the things, the thoughts around the room. And these are thoughts that we hope that we can tackle and break down as time goes by. But from us here at the Lawyers Hub, it's been a great session. We've had a great time engaging with all of you. Remember that you can follow us on YouTube That's at Lawyers Hub Kenya. Recording of the webinar will be accessible there, and a short explainer video will be accessible as well. You can also follow us on Twitter. That's Lawyers Hub Kenya. Remember to share your views on what the webinar has been like. Did you learn something new? Was it insightful? We would like to hear from you. Feel free to use the hashtags Lawyers Hub and Africa Law Tech so that we can be able to easily pinpoint your tweets and share them on our platform as well. That being said, I would like to close off the webinar. Remember, there's still some time to engage in the chat section. It's been quite late, as Linda added. So you can just take some time to maybe reintroduce yourself and share some contacts before we close off the webinar. Asanteni sana from us here at the Lawyers Hub. It's been a great session, and we're looking forward to furthering this discussion. Thank you and have a great afternoon.